Hi guys, today we're going to take you on a wild ride of starting to get ready for winter in northern New Mexico. So this video is going to go through everything wood stove. We ordered a little camping wood stove on Amazon and waited about 2 weeks for it to be delivered. In that time, we got a local guy to bring out a big load of wood. And side note here, unfortunately, he sold us 5.5 cords of wood and delivered about 2.5 cords, and we couldn't get this rectified, so that was unfortunate. But here's Sven stacking all the wood and getting it ready to be used when the temperature drops. And once the wood stove did arrive, there were a few things we had to do first, such as installing the legs and the door handle, as well as deciding where we're going to put our little stove. We decided on above the wheel well close to the door where we could just feed wood into it, so it would be nice and convenient. And we are planning on putting more heat barrier than you're going to see in this video. We got some cool flagstone, and we're going to put that around the fireplace a little more just to protect everything from the heat. Once it was all set up, Sven took the stove outside to start burning off the coating in a place that we wouldn't have to breathe it.
You can see that smoke coming off now really well, and that is a protective coating on this thing, and you do not want to breathe this stuff in. So point of firing this stuff, the stove up on the outside for the first time, is to burn all of this stuff off, and then, you know, having it safe for your cabin or wherever you want to install it. I do want to mention this thing is not rated for indoor use. Certainly not for a house, since we're using it in the bus, which is a non-permanent structure. We are aware of the risks. Make that decision on your own. If you Google these things, a lot of people put them in cabins, RVs, all kinds of different structures, and they're pretty happy with them. They have been pretty safe. The only thing what you need to do, since this is a fairly small chimney pipe that's just a bit over 3 inches. You want to sweep this, depending on what kind of wood you're burning and how dry or wet your wood is. You want to sweep this chimney quite often. I would say, I don't know, we're probably going to do it every month or so in winter. Just it's pulling pretty well. I haven't closed the door entirely yet because it's drafting much better like this. If I close it, you see how it's puffing? It doesn't have quite enough draft yet, quite enough heat build up. So if I close it all the way, it's dying on me. See that? You don't want that to happen inside, so just give it another second with more oxygen.
And he carried on burning the stove in for a few hours until it was no longer smoking that nasty smoke. Now it's time to work on where the stove is going to go in the bus. Of course, we have to vent the smoke out the roof. So first, Sven is removing some pieces from our ceiling so that we can cut a hole for the stovepipe to go through.
This steel metal we're thinking, which is actually leftover from framing in our window. That big RV side window.
You guys probably know by now how much we love to reuse stuff, so we planned on putting this big piece of metal to protect the wood of our ceiling and our walls in the bus, and then we're also lining the wheel well with license plates. So Sven is taking on cutting down the metal to the right size while I was preparing all the license plates. And now he's also grinding down the surface of the metal so that the coarse rust is gone, giving it a nice vintage looking texture.
I'm gonna put these aluminum brackets on here, which I still have. Oh man, they fit perfectly over these screw heads to center them. Nice, I don't even have to measure nothing. To keep, these are about 3/4 inches, so we have an air gap between the metal and the wall. So these are perfect. I'll put them up here, and then going through the bend, we'll have to put studs in regular intervals. I'm not sure exactly yet what I'm going to use for that. I need to see if I have any spacers or anything like that. But for now, I'm just going to drill holes and use just wood screws. Wood screws are fine. And then for the metal, I think we're going to use self-tappers to put them onto here.
And so that's what he did, measuring where the holes would go and then drilling the holes into the rails. And next we had to measure where the holes were going to go in the metal as well, so that they matched the holes in the rails. Now it's time for the metal to come inside. Sven is just giving it a little pre-bend so that it'll fit right into that bend of the roof. And then we stacked it on a little piece of wood to have that gap at the bottom to create the air gap. And then I held everything in place while Sven went to work screwing it in. The lower screws on the rails went in nice and smooth, no problems there. The upper part was a little tougher. Here's a closer look to show you how we worked with that upper part. We did use spacers between the metal and the wood, so I am holding those spacers in place while Sven drills. It's a little tricky because the screws were kind of going into the edge of the wood that he had cut to remove for the hole, so they were not super secure in some places, but we figured it out. And then, of course, once we were done, we realized that we would have to remove the metal to cut the roof hole. So we decided to leave the metal in for the time being and continue on with the license plates on the bottom so we could judge the distances and gaps and all of that. And with the license plates, like I said, I fished them out and selected which ones I thought were going to look good and washed them, got them all prepped and ready to go on. And then we just nailed them into place and used the hammer to bend them over the corners when we needed to. And we were using mismatched leftover nails that we had, and some of them did not like going into the license plates and the wood. At one point, about halfway through, Sven decided we should try to drill tiny little holes before we put the nails in, and that made our lives a lot easier. And that was it for phase 1 of the stove place. We really liked the way it turned out. The license plates give a nice tribute to our travels while using up materials that we already had. Now moving on to the following weekend, this is when Sven starts to drill the hole in the school bus roof. We didn't want to do this the previous weekend because if we didn't get it finished, then of course we would have a big gaping hole in our roof. So we waited until the following weekend. And this pipe that's going through the roof is a double-walled pipe. It is actually going on the outside of the stock pipe for the stove. And we found these pieces at the local Ace Hardware. They were a little hard to find because, like Sven said earlier, our stove pipe is a small size. We actually ended up getting a pellet stove pipe, which is dangerous because pellet stoves are not rated for as high of heat as our wood burning stove would be. So we don't recommend using a pellet stove pipe as your actual flue pipe. But since we have the double air gap here now, it's safe to put through our ceiling. And then, like I said, the metal came back down and Sven cut out the corresponding hole in the metal. Now he's just trimming out the spray foam, making everything nice and clear and safe for the pipes. And he also disconnected those middle two lights that were in that corresponding section just to be safe. Then the metal went back in for good, and we were just about ready for the stove. Now we're going to head up to the roof to work on the flue pipe, rain cap, and flashing.
Not bad. fits pretty well, actually.
This is pretty much our last step for this phase of prepping for the stove. Once the little stove came in, we assembled the pipes to go up through the roof, through the flue pipe, and then we used a high heat silicone to seal everything to each other on the roof, and used self-tapping screws to secure the flashing to the roof. Here's a visual of how we're getting that double air gap with the flue pipe in the middle and the double-walled pipe outside of that. This is a little collar that's going to prevent any water from getting into our double-walled pipe, sealing that off. And then the cherry on top is the rain cap, which you will see full on in just a minute. This is the last step, and then our stove will be ready to go. And that is what the finished roof view of the chimney looks like.
Just load it with some scrap wood offcuts, which we still have. And I'm gonna get ready for our first fire. Our little fan is up top. Let's see how this does. Should be just fine. Obviously it burned in nicely outside.
I do want to mention again that we're going to do a little more heat proofing around the stove area before we start really burning once the winter weather kicks in. But for now, everything's running really smoothly and we really like the way it turned out. And we got our wood stove installed just in time because the next week we actually had our first snow in the beginning of October. Crazy.